This is the Open Global Mind weekly call on Thursday, February 20th, 2025. The curse of May You Live in Interesting Times is playing out in full force. And I proposed a couple different topics in the invite yesterday, late yesterday, and I'm curious what y'all would talk about. I was just describing one of the more neutral topics, which was Eric and I joined a call yesterday about the AT-Proto, which is the AT protocol that Blue Sky and now a bunch of other apps are following in an attempt to create a decentralized, own your own data, not monopolizable, and that's a real reach, but an attempt to create an infrastructure that actually works. And they were pretty honest about, well, we haven't figured out all the business models so that you can have a distributed platform that has some degree of permanence and reliability, but here are what the candidates look like, et cetera. So it was actually really, really interesting. Nostr was mentioned, Rob, and then somebody pointed to a comparison of Nostr and other things, and then somebody who presented was actually a big user of ActivityPub, and she was like, and we're working toward this thing as well. So there was a very nice smell of interoperability in the conversation. And Eric, I don't know if you want to add any color to that, or your own take on it.
Okay, I'm looking up the link to a chart that compared the different protocols because I think that would be useful for us. But yeah, I enjoyed learning. My opinion is that it seems like every few years this topic will resurface and we'll retry solving the same problems. And so I'm suggesting the same ideas I had 3 years ago, basically, to this group.
Good. So I think I have the link that you're talking about from Bridgie Fed, and I'm going to post it into the chat. This is the link, I think. Eric, you can confirm or deny.
Yep.
Good.
So that proves that the brain is faster at finding things than workflowy.
There we go. Well, I took notes on the call the way I always do, and so I just went to I actually went to @proto because I knew I had connected it to @proto ecosystem thought.
That proved that Jerry was faster, not that the brain was faster. Although I do use the brain, but
so here, if you follow this link, you'll go to my notes from yesterday's call. But I'm interested in what everybody would like to talk about, given that, yay, Mr. Kranza, you got the right link. Interested in what everybody would like to talk about today. We can go into what's up with the situation and the current mess. We can go into the @Proto ecosystem and distributed apps and what the possibilities are. We can go into another topic if you'd like. The people who have shown up are the ones who can direct this conversation. Mark.
Can I turn my video off? Basically, I'm just very tired and want to kind of like.
You can always turn your video off, Mark. No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, Jose. We have a couple different topics that we're juggling between to pick a direction for the call. We could happily or ruefully go quite political. There's lots going on for sure. I will add as color commentary on that when I read yesterday's headline that Trump had called Zelensky a dictator, my heart really sank. It just went like through the floor. That was a step I didn't particularly expect, that we've sort of flipped the script entirely. I was also describing a call that several of us were on yesterday about the @Proto, the AT protocol, which Blue Sky uses, and how an ecosystem is arising. It seemed to me like a highly functional call in a community of people excited about building a distributed web-like thing that actually would work. And I'm wondering for, pardon?
I'd like to join those calls if you don't mind sharing the link.
It was a DWeb meetup call I can send you the link to it, but you just need to join the DWeb notifications wherever they are. Here's the link to the call. Get yourself on this list.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I've actually signed up for their conferences in Seattle.
Cool. Love that. Love that. So those are two topics that we could dive into, or whatever else y'all would like. Hey, Doug. We're topic choosing. Anybody with strong feelings?
At Proto.
At Proto?
That would be my vote.
We're missing some more technical, well, we have some technical folks on the call, but we're missing a couple other people who I know would be enthusiastic participants on that, like Pete Kaminsky. But happy to go into it some, and we can see where it takes us.
Could one repeat the
topic would be at Proto, or the protocol that Blue Sky uses. And AT stands for, the protocol was originally called the Authenticated Transfer Protocol. And then it was called ADX, and now it's known as at Proto. I will pass a link to the website that the project is hosted on. And it sort of competes with a couple other protocols for trying to keep distributed documents coordinated.
thanks?
Can I try to voice another thing that we might do? I love
Please, Sean.
the Proto though too. It's this challenge of how does one herd cats, or rather, the Cambrian explosion of diverse solutions for our global problems that we earnest and well-meaning humanist nerds are trying to create. How do we, what are the pathways to any possibility of unification of effort? So that instead of each nerd going down with his own little ship in a Cambrian extinction, a post-Cambrian extinction.
A sad but good metaphor.
We can instead somehow learn while still alive and avoid the Kuhnian fate of paradigm shifts happening one funeral at a time, if you can take my meaning at all. Over.
I like that topic a lot. And it's kind of a bridgy topic in the sense of, I think it applies to both of the topics that are kind of on our plate. The distributed infrastructure, but also the political situation. So I like it a lot. Sean, anybody else want to chime in? I'll just riff on it for a second and then bat the ball back to you, and then we can see where this goes. There's a thought in my brain: communities trying to fix world problems, and actually communities working to fix world problems. I'll paste the link in the chat.
Recording.
That's okay, Stacey.
Sign it.
Stacey, I just muted your other instance so we don't get the echo. And I was already recording, so I think this is your AI agent that's jumped in, so that's fine. There's a thought in my brain: communities working to fix world problems. That looks like, actually, I'm going to screen share for a second as well. As soon as I pasted the link in, there we go, and share. So here's the thought, and as you can see, there are like many. So here's Now What 2020, Project Drawdown, Platform Design Toolkit, the Neue Geographical Society, Human Energy Project, Extinction Rebellion, Dynamic Land, Earth One, Earth Regenerators, Earth for All, EBBF, the Ethical Business Building the Future, Economic Space Agency, or EXA, Eco Renaissance, Community Mycelium, Common.is, Common Planet, Common Future, Common Action Forum, Game B, Al Shark Forum, All We Can Save Project, Rebiz, Black Sheep, Builders Movement, CoGov Tech, Collaborative Governance Technologies, Collaborative Technology Alliance, which some of you are actually part of. So these are all groups that are trying to get together and fix world problems. Let me go to game B. I was just asked to in the chat, and I'd be happy to do that. So if I follow game B, here are articles about game B. Here's Jim Rutt, who's kind of has been the focal center of game B. Rutt is a super interesting guy, and so epochs of game B. I don't know what I've put there. I haven't looked here for a while. So here's different kinds of. Here's a post called "A Journey to Game B" by Jim, explaining what game B was all about, etc., etc. Here's the site. Actually, that's just the node for game B. And then, oh, that's funny. So I also have communities working to fix world problems is under promising solutions to world crises and thorny social problems, which is not about the communities, but about the solutions. So here are some books like Moving to a Finite Earth Economy, Mission Economy, A Moonshot Guide to Changing Capitalism, Presence and Exploration of Profound Change in People, Radical Markets, Uprooting Capitalism and Democracy, The Manifesto for a Moral Revolution, Design for Human and Planetary Health, A More Loving World, How to Increase Compassion, Kindness, and Joy. This is from the School of Life, which I really admire. I think that Alain de Botton and crew do an incredible job. I admire them the way I admire the nerd fighters, Hank and John Green, who also have SciShow and a whole bucket of really wonderful educational materials that make a ton of sense. But those are the nodes that matter here, and Mark has his hand up. Noosphere is already in there, Sean.
The difference between nonviolence and violence is Alain Botton. And that was my interest.
Love that. Can you say a tiny bit more?
I've been rage posting on Facebook, and by the algorithm, I'm not viral. Nobody listens. And it's fun for me, and people react to it in amazingly different ways. From Mark, you're a sage, to Mark, you're on drugs and you're crazy. So, it's been a fascinating experiment to allow my own mistakes and the mistakes or suggestions of the AI to enter into what I type. And as a former poet, I found the experiments in language completely fascinating. I didn't know that I was actually doing those experiments until later. And I apologized to many people for doing these experiments because it involved their perceptions of me. I'm a nonviolent person. But I remember Eowyn in The Lord of the Rings saying, well, it only takes one person to start a war, basically, in game theory. If the person wants to win, you're never going to get to win-win. It's always going to be win-lose. In summary, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Sean, you want to bat the ball back on the thing you started?
Yes, I've got too many things to say, so I'm not sure which of the many things I should say.
I think
now.
follow the Carranza path and just randomly poke at one and drop it on the table here.
Yeah. Okay. So I have about a 4-sentence text. I will paste it. How can we stop arguing about what is going on and start building a positive future instead? We need something like QuickBooks or CAD, but for ideas. It must help us digest and create all kinds of media, initiate and manage complex projects, process and evaluate evidence, support our growing understanding, and also help us clarify our shared values. By being our best selves together, perhaps we can rise to the challenges of our time.
Is this from you or is
Neobooks and
this
our
quoting
protocols.
This
from
is for
somewhere?
me. This is for
Okay.
me. And so I've got architecture, code, generations of code. What I don't have is enough nerd power to enact this in adequate time. Because that's what has happened to all the prior versions, is that not having any kind of financial engine behind this vision, I have not been able to enact it basically before the target is moved. And now AGI is going to happen this year, and ASI is going to happen in this presidential term. I mean, those are the odds at this point. And so we don't have enough time for another basically the human singularity needs to happen ASAP to be able to put a leash on Moloch, to put a leash on the technological singularity. How do we do that in time? And I think I know how. And I don't, it's just so unspeakably frustrating to not be able to enact that promptly. And I'm sure there are lots of other characters who are thinking they've got a similar potentiality in their pockets. Over.
Thanks, Sean. Stacy, I'll be with you in just one second. I just want to add something to what Sean just said,
Okay. Mine follows
which
his
is
too.
cool. So Doug Carmichael is not on this call right now, but he has been frequently on this call, a voice, often a lone voice that we need. And I'm not trying to say that you're implying this, but it's an approach to this. He's saying that we need a global unity on the approach. We need to agree on the framework to move forward. And I tend to think that that's absolutely impossible, that for political reasons and for reasons of consensus building and whatever else, that's not possible. But I'm very interested in how collectively we might point and work in similar directions, but using completely different methods, processes, groups, alliances, whatever it might be, but find unity in the process and the outcomes in some way so that we're not working at cross purposes, because you don't want a bunch of different groups doing things that cancel each other's efforts out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's interesting. And then you heard Jose jump in and say NeoBooks and our protocols might be a solution there, because in the Monday NeoBooks calls, we're trying to work on this also, and we're a little frustrated because progress is slow. But NeoBooks are trying to reinvent how ideas work in the world and to release them and get them to actually work more. And happy to go and describe that more. And Jose and Doug B and other people have been working on our protocols, which are ways of making a bit more explicit the ways particular things get done. I'm going to say repetitively, but if I created on our protocol for how to reach me. So my preference is don't ring my phone. I don't answer calls if I don't know the number. Text first, and then for me, I just gave the priority and the means that makes it best to communicate with me if you're a stranger, and also if you know me, just how to contact me. Other people might find my protocol and go, oh, I like that, and adopt it. And then there might be a bit of a bloom around a particular set or subset of protocols. Protocols can nest and connect, and they can form kind of little constellations of ways of doing stuff that are very eminently shareable. And you can think of our protocol as an instance of a NeoBook nugget. Or maybe a little composition of a couple NeoBooks nuggets, then that's how the two projects kind of intermingle a bit. There's a lot more to all of that. And then I'm personally frustrated also because Design from Trust, an idea that showed up in my head 15 years ago, feels also like a solution to these world problems. And I haven't finished a book about it. I'm trying to write a new book about it, but haven't gotten that out either. And I have, Sean, the way you were just phrasing what you were saying really resonated for me because I feel very, very similarly that way. And let me go to Stacy, who had her hand up there. Thanks for your patience. And then Mark, then I'll come to you.
Let me just take a second to just breathe in.
Sounds great.
Collect my
Please do.
thoughts again. So your email, when it came with the app and it had the choices, and it said atmosphere, and Kevin specifically asked about that, that prompted me to write something, which is why I'm late. So I'm late because that was the motivation for me to write something that needed to be written. Now, I was trying to get that document here using my phone and the laptop that I wrote on, and this thing here, which is really, really complicated and hasn't been solved for in the 6 or 7 years I've been in these communities. What I wrote was a piece for the Plex, which I will try to put in here, so I came here because what I want to do, what I would like to see done, because I was thinking I was coming to this call and you gave the 3 choices. So what I wanted to share with the people here is that I'd like to find a way to make clear for people between technology and greed and what's happening. I would like to write a creative story that illuminates why some people might be for what Elon's doing. Not the negative parts, but the positive parts that have to do with technology. And then cross that over in the story with what the oligarchs are involved in. So because of that, I wrote a story for the Plex in a creative fashion, which I'll try to put here, or if Ken doesn't show up to read a poem, maybe I'll use that as the creative writing part. But the story for the Plex is an introduction to me, but also an invitation. But the method I use is one that brings 3 different styles together and speaks to how do we get people with different styles to work together, doing different things, moving in the same direction, all the things we've been discussing here for years that I haven't really been able to, it's in my mind synthesized, but I haven't been able to get it out. And the last part I want to share because it ties in, I had 2 40-minute calls with somebody not associated with these groups, but I purposely went to a different group that I suspected would be more open-minded to trying things differently. In the first session, I learned what pairing and I think is it potatoing? Or did I just put the ing on it myself? Or maybe it's something that grew out of game B. I'm using the word potatoing for now on. I think I coined the ing part because I want to make it reflective of the earth and food, because that's sort of how I synthesize my language to work for this. I was able to, for 40 minutes of him listening very nicely, I got off and I did a year's worth of work. What I mean by work, just the editing and the pulling of the ideas together. The other thing he did, and a lot of you know me, I have a certain lack of confidence when it comes to expressing myself in certain groups. He took the story that I wrote about my experiences on Facebook, ran it through Google Notebook, sent it back to me. I was so negative about using AI as an emotional support. Well, in that case, I felt like a genius. But it was able to pick out things that I just assumed that when I spoke to smart people, they saw. And they don't sometimes, but the AI did. And just one experiment, though, I would like to try is I'd like to pull something really nonsensical and stupid from one of the people that I speak to on Facebook, run that through the notebook and see if they make that sound good too. Because that would be concerning to me. Because I know part of the reason that I sounded so good is I'm listening to people hype me up. I mean, I do think what I said was good anyway, but I'm just trying to be unbiased. With that, I'm complete. And I'm going to try to get it in the chat.
Oh, thanks, Stacy. What you just described resonates strongly with me, in part because last night I spent over 3 hours on a Zoom with my friend Al from way back when. He and I were housemates a long time ago. I always ping him when I need a different way of seeing things, and he did a really good job of that last night. And one piece of the conversation was him trying to describe to me, Jerry, it's like there's two completely different movies playing that are based on the same facts. And if you sent any of the screenplays for either of these movies into an LLM or a fact checking system, they would both check out as like, yep, these things all happened. These are all things that happened on the ground, etc. But the movies are completely 180-degree opposites of one another. And he was helping me see, that the current Trumpocalypse, which to the left looks like an apocalyptic shift into Nazism and worse, that's going to ruin our children's futures, etc. If you play the really concerned point of view, and I completely understand why that concern is there. And on the other front, he said, this is somebody who actually sort of cares about America and is fixing things that have been broken a really long time that nobody would touch, and is carrying out things he threatened or promised to do for years and is completely transparent about. Like all the things that the facts on the ground right now are things that he has been saying he was going to go do. And his followers were like, hey, look, he's actually like doing this. And that's why his poll ratings are up higher than they ever were in the first administration, because he's actually accomplishing some of these kinds of things. So I had to set aside a bunch of things in my head to just hear all of that and be present for it. And I think, Stacey, when you say that when you tell a story to smart people, you figure they'll pick everything up. We each
Not a
have
story, not a story. I meant when I tell my story,
Okay, but we each have frames and facts and whatever, and we filter out. Sometimes, I mean, unconsciously, we will not notice things that we're not paying attention to. We're looking for particular evidence to confirm or disconfirm our little thesis or a collection of theories about how things work. And we're often not aware, open to completely different interpretations of the situation. And so, I'm struck that a couple of GMs back, we had a call about the current situation and the Trump coup or whatever it was. And I started the call by saying, well, is it a coup? Is it a hostile takeover? What's the metaphor that frames it? And then there was a lot of pushback against like wasting time on the frame, like that was uninteresting. And to me, that's like deeply fascinating, because the two frames I just described right now are much more different than what I proposed 2 weeks ago on OGM here, which were all, it's some kind of calamity or really like horrible thing. How do we play with it? And I don't know. This is a confusing moment because, Sean, if we're looking to work in some kind of unity or unison together on solving stuff, finding frames that allow us to collaborate with people whom we disagree with is going to be really useful. Because if you think that the other people are evil and eat their children and have green blood, that's almost impossible to do. And that's, by the way, it's what militaries do in order to get people to shoot, to kill other people, is they demonize the enemy, and the enemy is inhuman, doesn't deserve to live, et cetera, et cetera. You hear this over and over again, but we're seeing that in the political realm on both sides. And I'm just very gingerly trying to talk about this because it's such a freaky set of things, and I know that our calls lean left heavily. And I'm trying to figure out how can we have a more open global mind, perhaps, if someone had only coined that phrase sometime, to dive into these issues and sort them out in some way that's really productive going forward. Mark, you had a short comment from earlier. Please go ahead, and then I'll go to Jose.
Thank you. It's no longer short because there's 12 different things that I have reactions to since Sean Murphy said something.
Can you pick from among them and not do all 12?
Yes.
Thank you.
Starting in reverse temporal order. Jerry, you said something, binding. There's a notion of conceptual blending rather than binding. It's typified by some neuroscientists, but Terry Deacon described it very, very well. We have a picture of Obama riding a bucking donkey. Now, what does that mean? Well, we know Obama used to be the president, was president at the time. The donkey represents the Democratic Party. We blend those images, not bind those images. The images are binded, and I forget the rhetorical term, but basically when you use one term, the White House, to refer to Trump or Obama. Holes in my brain, I apologize. But blending rather than binding. We have bound Obama to president. We have bound donkey to Democrats and bucking to fighting. And so conceptual blending merges them in our minds without conscious appreciation. Now, very quickly to Sean, he mentioned something that reminded me of a quote from Stuart Brand. Time is only a resource because it limits our transactions. Time is a constraint. We don't have enough time. We have plenty of time. All of us have the same amount of time, a lifetime. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jerry. Please, Jose.
Thanks, Mark. Go ahead, Jose.
Thank you, Mark. For me, I've been wondering for quite a while whether we're trying to do this in a way that's just not feasible. As you've described, Jerry, the idea of us trying to get everybody on the same page, everybody to agree, blah, 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 blah. Not going to happen. We can't get two people to agree on anything. And I think maybe that concept of us trying to figure out how to work together or agree on things is in itself a barrier, because we've intellectually thought that was the smart thing to do. And when we look at life, we don't actually see any of that. Life doesn't agree on anything. Life just does what it does, and it figures out how to cope with whatever the context is every minute of every day. And so how do we then emulate what's happening underneath? And my sense is the way we emulate what's happening underneath is not by trying to intellectually come together and agree on our thoughts and so on and so forth, but to actually just do what we do and find, Doug coined this, public utilities, create public utilities that allow us to do things with one another, but not in agreement necessarily. Just simply have the underlying infrastructure to be able to work together, not independently, but as peers in a system that allows us to work together, rather than sitting down and trying to figure out what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, everybody must agree, and then we're going to do it. Because I think if we model that, which I believe is how life works, then we've got a place to start. But if we're trying to do what you described, we're never going to get there. In fact, I think it's destruction of our ability to do anything. I'm done.
Thanks, Jose. I'm agreed. I'm like, we'll never get everybody on the same page. What we can hope to do is have everybody singing a resonant tune. I don't know what a good metaphor here is, but working in somehow in concert, not against each other. And that I think is even a giant challenge. Stacy, you had your hand up a moment ago. Did you want to?
Accident. It was an accident. I
It was
leaned on it.
you tripped across the lever that triggers the hand.
Working on my 3 devices, trying to get information effectively
Ah,
to you. I hit it by accident.
gotcha. If you write things into a Google Doc, you can log into that Google Doc from any of your devices and copy paste out of it. That might solve part of your problem, but don't know exactly what
Terry,
trouble you have.
but you're getting to the point. I do want to say something really quickly. That's not the easy way, and I am determined to not do things the hard way. That's part of like my game, my experiment in the world. And I don't want to do it the way the tech people decided this is the way people think and do it. This is easy. This I know exactly how to do it, and it's easy. I don't want to sync up my machines together. There's so many things that I don't want to do. And that is part of the game and the experiment. It would be nice if there were people that could communicate with me the way that the programmer I spoke about earlier did. That was like, how can I help you? And I haven't come across a lot of that because I have an agenda. I'm going to use my skills to match my agenda. Here I go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you. Again, going backwards in time. Stacy, how can I help you? I was in Southern California. A woman paid me to travel down there to help her understand computers for her new job, a peer counselor at Goodwill Industries. At the end of 4 days, she said to me, "Bah." And I said, "I want peace." And she said, "Liar!" back. I did what my parents taught me to do. I left. Now, Jose, 2 people can't agree on anything. I disagree. It's called physics and mathematics. My father, short story, got a call 4 in the morning. He managed the code, machine code, for the backup computers for the 3 computers on the space shuttle. And when they went down, the backup computers were the only things allowing the space shuttle to land. He got a call, and we were all gathered around my father. This was at 4 in the morning because this was like a real weird thing to happen, and there was like this intense emotional energy. And he asked if it was safe to land the shuttle, and he said, "I don't know." He told the truth. The shuttle fortunately landed safely, but that's a searing emotional memory that I uncovered by doing some very difficult trauma healing. But yeah, people, many of them got together and they put a man on the moon. They didn't put a woman on the moon, but a woman did the calculations that allowed them to do that. Who was that woman? Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Doug B, and feel free to take a moment, take a beat before jumping in.
In the darkness, I'll say it was a woman of American African heritage.
It's the movie Hidden Figures, Mark. And we can come back to it. Let me change the floor to Doug.
So, um, this is sort of a little bit of an orientational shift on what Jose alluded to in terms of nature doesn't have agreement. I sort of would frame it a little different. That reality in the natural world is, and everything comprising it in it, all the energies and flows and dynamics by and between are. Like they happen. And sometimes experientially for, living meat sacks like us, the reality of that is horrendous. And sometimes it can be very beautiful and everything in between. And so a lot of my sort of relating to bumping up to this domain of how do we do us better, differently in service to generating a different result, has really brought my focus to present moment. Like the present moment as where the action is, moment to moment as a moving target. And how I do me in that moment as an actor, contributor, but as a receiver, processor, is becoming more and more the focus of inquiry. And what are the conditions or environment or space or frame within which me plus others can do, create, solve, figure out, navigate, make decisions better. And the prevailing paradigm focuses on, look Ma, what I can do. It's all this technology and all the intellectual abstraction, and all of the artifacts and the data, and AI as, the ability for the data to take care of the data, for the technology to process the data. All of that, none of that speaks to me as a human being, an agent, relating to the present moment, like being in the present moment, responding to the immediate question of what's needed now. It's sort of like, throwing up a massive tornado cloud of dust and dirt and stuff into the air and trying to see a way clearly to the other side. And the feeling I have is that we're constantly spinning around in this, in sort of dazed confusion of our own making, rather than just sort of getting to a still place, letting the air clear, letting things settle, and starting with, like how we talk to each other. And are there fundamental differences in orientation and approach to doing that on a whole being level, including sensing, feeling, including the energetic dynamics, on a much more not just reasoned but felt, sensed basis, connecting with each other, and just the fundament of understanding each other, like semantic conversation, and not speaking in code, letter codes, number codes, color codes, secret language, special handshakes, all that stuff. So with that, I'm complete.
Thank you, Doug. Mr. Jones.
Can I?
It sounds like you're needed locally for a moment.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just really quickly, I think I want to echo what Doug said. I think the prefrontal cortex is not the place to look for the answer right now. I think this is a limbic moment. I think it's much more like a flood than it is a scenario planning. Somebody made the analogy of Joseph could think long term when he served with Pharaoh, and he planned for 7 lean years, 7 fat years, etc. And Noah said, "Oh my God, it's coming! Do something now." And I think people, when they appeal to reason in the middle of a crisis, are going to fail. Your reason is not the thing you do in a crisis. It's real short-term tactical response, awareness of the surroundings around you. And I mean, that's obviously, we have lots of that here with this, this flood. But it's been near-term stuff. And I think, everybody who wants to say, let's find a way to find a reasonable way through the crisis is going to be doomed, just like they're always doomed. And I got to go apparently, but I just wanted to say that. I hope to be back. All
I
right.
hope you're not doomed.
No, yeah,
Um,
I think I'm doing fine. I mean, I'm
Excellent.
having a big cultural problem of these nonprofits I'm working with not knowing how to think entrepreneurially. They think in program grant buckets. And I'm saying, no, this is synergies between a product you're launching and distribution of another product line. Says, no, we can only focus on the one product because that's what we got a grant for. It's like, no, anyway, whatever. All right. I'll talk to y'all later. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Kevin. Mark.
I'm sorry that Kevin left. I tried to help Kevin by going to a number of nonprofits in San Francisco, and they all referred me to the Red Cross.
Wow.
Yeah. They said we can only help within our program, within our rules, within our laws. There's a difference between rules and laws. Rules are what govern the playground. Laws are the Constitution. And Trump is confusing them, saying that I'm the ruler. I give out rules. You must obey the rules. We have a system rather than a story. It's called the Constitution. It's called the legal system. He's trying to break that. What's the frequency, Kenneth? Now, that's a very weird question associated with assassinations. And it's a false question. The real answer is the antipodes. It's not the frequency, it's the amplitude and the size of the box. And if you're on a sphere called a planet, we're not in a box, we're on a sphere. Limbic as opposed to reality. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Sean, how are we doing on your topic?
Yeah, we're all filling up the elephant somehow or other. It's great.
The elephant is giggling.
Whoa, hey,
Yeah.
let's have some boundaries here. Yeah, I think if we were, it occurs to me that yeah, I'm proposing some rituals here in the chat, and and as bounds breakers, as what is it? Membrane openers,
openers,
right?
softeners.
That might assist us in softening our boundaries, in broadening our technological perspectives. In like, I suggest that all of us who already have the global mind bug, okay, should be budgeting a fraction of their time in proactively proactively reaching out and basically taking a technological kind of ayahuasca trip regularly, every day, every week for sure, because the cadence now is too fast. I would submit even that every day is now the right cadence, that we should be making love with our peers in this journey so that we can learn fast enough.
John, thank you. Um, let's rest with what Sean just said. I'll bring us back out of silence for a little bit. Thank you. That was a kind of a beautiful reminder of both the urgency of the moment and the need to take time. Um, um, and I sometimes say jokingly that everything would run smoothly if it weren't for people. Like the pesky humans on the planet make everything hard to figure out, hard to do, hard to execute. We're just like, man, we're complicated.
I had
And
a variation of that from my days in the music business, which is
uh-huh.
it would be a great business if artists weren't human beings.
Well, we're working right toward that right now. Seems to be one of the goals of AI. Does anybody read Ted Gioia? He's a musician and music industry analyst, and his newsletter, The Honest Broker, is quite fabulous. And I don't know, he's a compulsive writer, uh, but he writes with great clarity and insight. Uh, and I'll post a link to his Substack, the Honest Broker, in our chat. But OMG, if you want to insights on, and there's a bunch of other smart people in the music industry as well, but his is particularly good. Um, who would like to take this conversation in some new direction? And by the way, I love how this call started. We sort of kicked around a couple things. Sean said something that was like bridgy, and we kind of took off down this street that was full of treasures and cool stuff. So thank you for how this materialized. I I like unprogrammed moments where you find your way to something that's meaningful. So this has been really satisfying for me. Stacy.
Before we go in a new direction, can I just
Yep.
end this? Sean put in the chat a quote from Yogi Berra. It was impossible to get a conversation going. Everybody was talking too much. Can you just imagine for a minute, because this will be helpful to me, that everybody's in the center having that conversation. Now imagine around the center, you have that pairing, or for me, potatoing, whatever it is, so it might be a potato, a pear, a potato, a pear, potato, a pear, potato, a pear. That could lead to the next group of conversations. And that I mention that because that's what I keep bringing up, like in Neo books, when I'm trying to describe visually. So I just wanted to call that out for some of you. And now you can move on to something else. That was helpful.
Thank you. Hi, Lisa.
Hello. I've been
Take us away.
well, hi Doug, everyone. And I'd like to learn more or find out when the Neo Books call is, as an aside. So if you put that in the chat. So I'm a
Happy to.
long-time language educator. And now I'm working in fields around, well, I didn't realize it, but I guess I'm becoming a software entrepreneur. Because I'm seeing what this power of language, a deep understanding of the domains of language. I'm seeing that my internet, I've had tricky internet, so apologies for that. But I long time went off into the desert with a Yaqui Indian teacher who told me that his father used to say, if you want to read people's minds, listen to their words.
Wow.
So the moment that is calling me is about listening. And these organs of perception that we don't have because we're human. So that there's other ways of knowing. And what's profound for me right now is the power of the subtle and the vulnerable and this space. So I'm just curious what the group knows: silence and space in the dialogue where too many people are talking at once, that there's no conversation. So that's what I'm curious about right now. I totally agree with what was said before, Doug, and I think it was, is it Kevin? Someone who left, I think, yeah, was talking about the limbic and the relationship to events where, well, Mark was speaking to events that we call trauma, which I understand is now one of the words, if that is true, being scrubbed from National Science Foundation research list, if that's true or not. But the point about trauma is in the moment, you don't have the resources available. But in order to survive, you go into this place where the demands are so much that the psyche has and the body has to be preserved. So you reduce yourself into very, very small, and you literally stop breathing. And then that leaves a mound later. So the space of silence, I'm not talking about non-action. I'm talking about the powerful space of being a peacemaker as a listener.
Thank you, Lisa. There's a thought in my brain called we're in an epidemic of not listening. And we just, years ago, I also thought of a word, a duologue, which is not a dialogue. It's two simultaneous monologues. We do a lot of that as well in the world. And then there's so much combat around words and ideas. And the words, some words are so triggering. And one, just to go back into the politics for a second, the far right has figured out that emulating Nazism in their tropes and word choices and other kinds of organizational forms is insanely triggering. And the poor country of Germany, which caused World War II, kind of made it through losing 21 million Germans. Russia lost 28 million humans, and just in World War II. America lost 435,000, so we weren't touched nearly as much. They lost, a generation of people. But Germans decided after that war that the only way to prevent more wars was to directly face this, and they have, war guilt, which the far right that's one of their talking points is this war guilt. We didn't cause it. It's not a thing we're going to honor. And so worldwide, people have figured out that they can trigger everyone by adopting Nazi tropes, which is happening as we live and breathe. And that's deeply frightening in many ways. But it's also, but if you sort of wake up and think about it as a form of intentionally triggering messaging and let it just be that, then you can listen to what's happening and what's, what people are doing and other sorts of things. But the use of that language to many people, if you're raised in Germany, there is in Berlin, a city that my maternal family escaped from in 39, just barely. There are things called Stolpersteine, which are tripping stones you can trip over. They're kind of like cobblestones, but they're little markers that are put in the pavement all around Berlin that mark where Jewish families were taken away or where things happened, sort of events. And there are all sorts of commemorations and markers just to try to prevent the repetition of those incidents, right? And at this point, that's being shoved back in their face. JD Vance just basically gave a speech in which he insulted the Germans and said, "Hey, y'all, you need to let your Nazis speak up more. This is suppression of free speech." And I don't know how I feel about this because part of the problem on, the campus intolerance, for example, in the US was not letting people who had sort of Nazist leanings come and speak. Like Richard Spencer got booted off some campuses and a couple other people, but that just fueled the far right. That just fueled the far right. And I will look it up in my brain, but there's a writer who distinguishes between hate speech and dangerous speech. And she draws the line there. She says that there is some speech which is trying to incite violence on purpose. That should be forbidden. But other things can be permitted. And I am no scholar of that topic. I'm just fascinated by how that topic, that dynamic, that pressure has been weaponized in the last decade or three, to great effect. Really, to great effect. That dynamic is not serving us well at this moment. Mark.
In Santa Ana, California, I escaped by a friend taking me to the art walk and later a pizza place with his friends from Mexico City who came. And they gave me some books, amazing books. One of them, this one. Beautiful book. Free. In it, there's a fold-out section, a centerfold of the Hindenburg. In it, in section B, there's a smoking room inside the Hindenburg.
Because everybody smoked. There was no way you were going to travel that far in a closed capsule without smoking.
Folly on steroids, not just stilts. All right? Yeah.
Yeah.
This made the entire trip a very traumatic one to Fullerton, California on the Amtrak, which was a wonderful ride. Tip, California Rail Pass, 7 trips over 21 days, $159.
That's it?
That's it. And the one-way trip was, I could have paid $111 or $150 for a one-way trip. Tip, infrastructure, Rail Pass. Now, this picture is a painting of Brazil. Brazil, la la la, la la la. And it has the Hindenburg with swastikas over, I think it was Rio de Janeiro, and a statue. I laughed out loud. And, you laugh until you cry. Hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, except what we want you to not see.
Doug, floor is yours.
So this language, language and words, and the power of, I think there's a tendency to look at the superficial of that and not dig below it to the living, reactive, emotional, energetic dimension of that. And the whole free speech thing is a rabbit hole and a straw man argument. The idea of, why yelling out fire in a crowded theater isn't, subject to quote free speech. The invocation of, and it's not just words, it's also gestures, the invocation of words and the deployment in public out loud of the Nazi salute as a gesture. Under cover of quote free speech, what those things are actually doing is they're grooming the audience to it being okay. And underlying it is always scapegoating. Underlying it is always the targeting and demonization of others. So it's the combination of those two things that make it lethal. And a person given a scapegoat and then given permission to express and then ultimately act out with violence, that demonization and scapegoating, that othering, is what, leads to the Holocaust. Like it's a straight line. And it's not intrinsic to a word or a gesture. It's the underlying permission and absence of consequence in the face of. So the thing that was the telltale for where we are and where we're headed were how many times were, quote, red lines decried and declared over the last 5 years since Trump emerged down the staircase, right? Talking about Mexican immigrants as rapists and all that horrendous stuff. How many red lines were crossed without a John McCain going, no? Without somebody stepping, without, I forget who it was in the Joe McCarthy era in the hearing going, no, not okay. And there has to be a consequence. There has to be a point where there is a no. There's just a societal no, an authority derived no. A no, not just as a no, but a no with a consequence, with a, we're not going to allow that to continue. We're not going to allow you to do what you are telling people to do or looking to do yourself. And right now, today, no consequence. No consequence anywhere. And all the Democrats and liberals and left wingers and other can bemoan and cry and rent their shirts and whatever. But as a practical matter, you don't have it stop until somebody says no. Like the mass resignations in the Justice Department saying, not going to do that. It's just fucking illegal and we're not going to do that. And enough of that in enough places, concurrently, and this train can be stopped. But absence a consequence, absence somebody in fact saying no and preventing it from progressing, we end up with a Holocaust. And I'm complete.
Thanks, Doug. Maybe two things spurred by what you just said. One is my recent speaking trope is about rethinking constraints. And I gave a speech a couple of weeks ago, and in the middle of the speech, I said something unplanned. I said, "Oh, and by the way, the incoming administration that is sort of freshly on duty is teaching a master's class on rethinking constraints. I am not a fan, but my hat is off to their ability to identify the boundaries that were constraining them from causing change and winning elections and doing whatever else, and just shredding them." And then one of the things you were just pointing to, Doug, I think, is that famous moment in the Army McCarthy hearings where the lawyer Welch basically says, Mr. Senator McCarthy, have you no sense of shame? And I've been waiting for that have you no sense of shame moment in Trump's political career for a really long time. And I'm likely to be in the grave spinning at many RPM before that ever happens in some sense, because, and I think this is really interesting, because shamelessness is in fact one of his strategic weapons. He is perfectly content to say things that no mortal would have the balls to say, or whatever, many things which are outright lie. I mean, but the outright lies are just a way of getting people to loosen up their brains and leave what their eyes are telling them and their observed reality and enter some other zone. And I say this like we started the call earlier. I talked about my conversation with Al. Kevin, I think you missed this part of the call, but last night I spent like 3+ hours on the phone with Al Chang. And he was doing a great job opening my eyes to how else to see the stuff that's happening on the ground. I was like, God damn it. But he's a really astute observer. So anyway, Mark, and then whoever else.
I've been running an experiment on Facebook. And again, it was unintentional at the first, but it's called flooding the zone. Where have we heard that before? Jerry just mentioned a silent other zone, a shameless zone. And Kevin, gosh, I wish he were here, because he posted in our notes something that I said yes and no to. I grew up in Orange County, California, at a time of the New Age, where everybody was creating a religion. I was raised Catholic, strictly by my parents. Ooh, 5 years old. If you have Congress, intercourse with a woman, and you're not married,
5?
Congress. If you have Congress, if you know a woman,
Mikey, could you have Parliament?
without the binding contract of marriage, you will burn in hell, not forever, but forever and ever. You will burn in hell forever and ever. Not only that, hi Gil, the woman will also burn in hell separately. You'll never see her again. And she'll hate you for taking her to hell. Now, I define that as child abuse. But the Catholic religion's been around for how many thousands of years? And Jewish religion? Okay. Chinese religion. Gil, you're my friend. Truth speaks to power.
Oh,
The
I
emperor has
love
no
the hand
clothes.
conversation going on. Yeah, it's great.
The emperor has no clothes. What am I wearing? A shirt. But down there, jeans. So, how do you know that? Am I lying? Well, rethinking collimating, bringing our conversations together, going backwards in time by remembering and writing down my notes what I want to comment on. I don't want to flood the zone here. I'm speaking too much in this particular conversation. I don't like that. But I want to point out Terry Deacon, who I have studied for decades, and it's very, very difficult. Constraint is a higher level emergent notion above homeodynamics, which is entropy. Entropy happens. It will always happen. The higher level emergent, stable, stepped stability, which goes to Bronowski, Jacob Bronowski, brilliant scientific explainer. Stratified stability. You have an emergent stratus that is stable. We call it self-organization or morphodynamics. Form dynamics, dynamics that retain form, like a whirlpool, which goes away when the water's gone. Highest level is self. Teleodynamics, a stratified level that allows a self. What is a self? A self is blended and binding constraint, otherwise known as regulation. Not rules, laws of physics. Rethinking is challenging our assumptions of what we believe that we know, which is called desire. We want to believe whatever the hell we want to believe. I love and study love, and I have reprioritized my love. I love reality first, then myself, and then a particular woman who doesn't really love me as much as I love her. That's a problem. I need to change that priority a bit to find a different woman. Polyamory, who needs more than one woman? My God. Now, Catholic Church suggests monogamy. Other species of animals, monogamy, not so much. Me, I find it rather difficult to love in a particular way more than one. That's me. But I find many women about 10 years younger than me all into this polyamory thing. A man doesn't have enough resources in our society, or at least in my milieu, to support even one woman. They're adapting in a weird way, but it's not my way. I have different constraints. Saying no, Doug, is resistance. And there are many people all over the place. Heather Cox Richardson. Guess what? We're resisting you. We are gathering in 50 state capitals last weekend to say, hell no, thank you. Nancy Reagan, don't do drugs. No, thank you. Nancy. Or, thank you, Nancy. Always be polite, which is defined by Joseph Campbell as respect for the milieu in which you find yourself. Respect, OGM people. Mark out.
Thanks, Mark. Doug.
I wanted to respond to Sean, your reference to ritual in the chat. So a ritual is actually a really unique thing. you sort of alluded, the way you framed it. Let me see if I can find it. You said periodic practices for tending community and nurturing the individual. And there's actually research and science around what the ingredients of that are. And I wanted to share it because I ended up in a deep dive around it. So the touchstones of ritual is that it is a intrinsically repetitive practice, experiential practice kind of thing that everybody that engages in it does together. And what they derive from it is each individual has competence in it. So they know what it is and they can participate. And which is why rituals tend to be relatively simple and and repetitive, not elaborate and complex. And the other touchstone is that they are not carrying a purpose. They are definitionally non-utilitarian. They are in and of for their own sake in the doing of it. And the third and last ingredient that makes a ritual is that there is a transcendent dimension in the doing of it, transcendent of the individual, of self, that by doing it collectively, we strengthen the connectivity of the whole, which is that nurturing the community piece. And I wanted to share that because I really think we could use a lot more rituals, new rituals for the era and world we're living in. And I'm complete.
Sean, I don't want to speak for you, so I'm wondering whether you're thinking what I'm thinking, which is that the rituals that you were posting into the chat were not meant to be religious rituals or sacraments or of a spiritual nature. They were more simple practices that could bind people and community better to collaborate and get stuff done. Which I think fail some of the higher purpose definitions that Doug, you just offered us, which I agree with for a religious ritual. But I just entered types of ritual in my brain into the chat. There are loads of different kinds, like the habit you have every day of flossing and brushing is a ritual. That's a ritual. It ain't that spiritual unless you're doing mindfulness practice around it, in which case it sort of could be. Go ahead, Doug.
Habit or practice as distinct from a ritual, that's the distinction. What officially makes it a ritual as opposed to a habit is that it is not purpose driven. It is in and of and for its own sake, in service to the individual relative to the whole, the collective, and the collective relative to the individual and the practice. That it's not purpose, that it doesn't have that habit addition. It's for its own sake.
Go ahead, Sean.
I would, believe it or not, I would submit that simultaneously, the sense that I am invoking with my use of the word ritual is in full alignment actually with all the aspects that you're identifying, but it's also it's also gesturing at at conscious evolution. It's an embrace of conscious evolution and creative emergence I don't know how to say this, that I'm submitting, a possibility for us, if we can't herd the cats, is for the cats to have ways to play with one another, that is generative of cats coming up with new tricks. Okay. So it isn't purposive at one level, and yet at another level it is purposive. Okay.
Opening to emergence. How's that?
Precisely. It's supportive of, it's generative of emergence. Exactly.
Yeah, generative potential.
Intent. So I challenge us, I invite us to I would submit that perhaps one of the most generative things that we can do in this OGM group is to try to figure out what the rituals are that we can perform that can trigger the most generative emergences. Okay. Over.
Thanks, Sean. Mark, you may be having the last word today.
Oh, dear.
I know. My, how time flies when we're having fun.
I'd
Go,
like
sorry.
to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. There's a notion that poems of Emily Dickinson, and I'm trying to get them in my head. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. La 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 la. And eternity, it's the real thing. Coca-Cola or death.
That was pretty close to what Ken Homer would have gifted us with at the end of the call here. That was some poetry there.
Well, I'm a former poet.
Are you a recovering poet?
Ooh, you cut to the bone. You're a butcher
That's me.
with words.
Slay the souls.
Only words. Words matter. But you know what? Reality matters more than words. It's what we do with those words and our rituals with those words. I'm in a ritual right now. It's called the Thursday check-in meeting. Respect.
Although today was not our check-in format, but still, I'm with you.
You know, it's what to do in Thursday mornings. Set a timer. Be sure to wake up. Try to get some sleep before this meeting. I use a CPAP machine. It tells me how many hours I've been using it. It helps. Some people, Mark Graham at the Internet
Okay.
Archive said it was a game changer for him. It changed his life. Me, it helps.
Good to see you all.
Yep.
Have a good
Yeah.
day.
Stacy or Judith or Lisa, somebody wanted.
Stacy had to drop off.
Okay.
I think it's probably time to wrap our call.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Question.
Well,
Judith.
thank you.
Go ahead, Sean.
Thanks,
Jerry,
everyone.
how do we get at the do you have a ritual for capturing these chat sessions so that those are, can you?
Of course. So are you on the Mattermost server?
On the web?
The Mattermost
Imagine
server.
me needing complete onboarding.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
If you go to the link I just put in the chat and just create a username for yourself. It's a free server. Mattermost is an open source thing like Slack, and Pete Kaminsky hosts this version of Mattermost for us. there is a channel that you will find. Once you join and create a username for yourself, you'll be thrown into a channel called Town Square, which is the overall town square for the entire channel, which hosts several different organizations for the whole Mattermost server. If you'll find another channel called OGM Town Square, every time after the call later today, I will post links to the YouTube, the video for this call, which I will have uploaded to YouTube, the AI summary, the chat, and the transcript. They're all there for all of our calls. Which is a very, very unstructured data. It's a kind of a messy way to share this stuff. I don't put it into a database or some other resource where it might be better. I also don't upload these calls to the Internet Archive, which may be a bad thing. I maybe should do. I maybe should have uploaded all these calls to the archive. Mark is saying that would not be a bad idea.
I can help.
That had not occurred to me to do, and it's probably a great idea.
For those of us that are less tech than you, Jerry, could you throw what you just said into an email link that gets us there? Because
sure. Just sort of the chat onboarding. Go ahead, Lisa.
yeah.
We can also have an onboarding call separate from this where I'd be happy to help. And
that'd be cool.
And generative emergence is what Terry Deacon and I study. Emergence is generative. Emergence generates higher and lower levels. Just saying. Thanks.
Are we all on the signal? Who's on the? Would it be possible? Would it be possible, Mark, to note to do the invite to the onboarding on the signal?
The signal?
So Ken Homer has created a group on Signal for OGM, and I think it's crossing into other groups as well, because he's concerned about the current wave of privacy intrusion that's likely breaking over everybody.
Do you mean surveillance capitalism, Jerry?
No, not even just the capitalist part of it, which has already happened to us. It's the more political side of it that he's more worried about, I think. But yes, they would work hand in hand with each other happily, I think. So that's becoming kind of yet another chat to monitor in some sense, but it's a safer place to talk.
I am there, but I'm on Signal, but not on that chain, and guess I would like to be. So I'm
good. If you find Ken Homer on Signal, if you can look up Ken Homer, or I can pass you his phone number to connect with him directly. He's the only person who can add people to that group.
Okay, I just texted you my email, but I'll look and see if I can find them on there. And then also write the Neo books as an educator and working on developing an ed software that I think will touch into many of the things you spoke of today.
Cool.
Yeah. What I want to know more about Neo books.
Why don't I tell you right now?
Okay.
So the NeoBooks calls are Mondays at 11. We just shifted them back earlier in the day. They were a little later. You don't need to worry about that. And I'm going to have trouble next Monday. I will be in the air. I will hopefully have landed, but the next Monday's NeoBooks call may be in a different Zoom than usual. So watch for that. But NeoBooks.
9 PT?
It's 11 a.m. PT.
Okay.
Exactly. And the idea of NeoBooks showed up because way back, back a bunch of years, I was looking for a slide in a slide deck, and I was using Keynote, and I was like, this one slide that I use often, I know that the last time I used it, I improved it a lot, and I could not find that version of it, and I was really frustrated. And suddenly it dawns on me, slide decks should really be playlists of wiki pages, where each slide is just a separate page in the wiki, and the presentation is a special slide that has a list of the pages in your presentation. And so I said this to my friend Kenneth Tyler, who at that time ran a wiki, and we both lived in Berkeley. And he says, "Oh, I can sort of prototype that." So he went and created a play button on his wiki called SeedWiki, and I created a page with a playlist. I hit the play button. It went full screen and then gave me left and right buttons on screen and keyboard. And it then marched through the pages, which I had written on each page in large font, just a couple bullets, just to practice doing a presentation. And the prototype worked great. And then it was very easy from there to imagine adding a theme with art, with web CSS styling and all that, animations, illustrations. You could sort of reassemble PowerPoint from that. But then that slide you love that you really improved would be the same slide that you used in other presentations, because wikis keep each version of each page. You could then scroll back and forth and see how did it evolve over time. You could then say, show me this presentation the way we showed it in October of 23. Then you could say, what would that presentation look like today, by just running every page to its most current version and seeing how that would change the presentation. You could have the same slide reused by multiple people in multiple decks, because a deck would just be a set of pointers or a playlist out to information. Then more recently, it dawned on me that a book is just a roll-up of these nuggets. And my word for these little elemental component parts is nuggets. And a nugget is usually pretty brief, pretty small, like assume good intent is one of my favorite sort of example nuggets. And I'm still unclear myself whether that phrase is the nugget or that phrase and a brief explanation of it is a nugget, because that brief explanation suddenly makes it not a unique identifiable phrase, because just the phrase assume good faith or assume good intent is very findable. The moment you've described it in prose, anybody could describe it in lots of different ways and it gets really interesting. But a nugget is small, and nuggets can contain nuggets. They're composable and they're includable and all of that. So what we're doing in Neo Books is we're trying to rethink how these ideas work in the world. I called it Neo Books because books are bait. Books are well-known cultural shiny objects. Everybody knows what a book is. And there's this general assumption that in Western culture, smartest people write books and put their best ideas in those books. So books are the containers of all wisdom. And the Internet Archive, where Mark has worked, is trying to scan all the books in the world because that's where the wisdom is. I'm one of those people who believes that books and PDFs are where information goes to die, because we then overprotect those books. We overprotect the ideas. Copyright has run amok. Copyright law is way out of control and is killing our ability to use and make shareable those ideas. So the Neo book concept is just, we don't really want books. The first paragraph of the Neo book that I'm writing about design from trust, the topic I mentioned earlier in the call, the first paragraph of it is, thank you for buying this souvenir. It's a snapshot of a bunch of ideas, but the more interesting thing is actually online for free, where each of these nuggets is a wiki page in community that other people can contribute to, use if they want to, appropriate, change, fork, do whatever the dynamics of ideas might be. And then I'll add one thing to this, which is, I then at some point I had this idea of what I call, I'm even forgetting what I call it. It's not animating, instantiating, I think. That's not even the word. Anyway, how do I take an idea and implement it as software? And I think this is not true of all ideas, but I'll give you one example where this is like, oh, I would love that. There's a pattern language called Liberating Structures, which is for facilitators. And a bunch of friends of ours kind of developed the pattern language. It's well known. It's less of a pattern language and more of a compendium of methods. One of the methods in liberating structures is called 1, 2, 4, all, which says if you have a group with a thorny subject, give them time by themselves, put them in pairs, bring them in fours, come back to plenary, and then it does that. Many people have not heard of liberating structures, never mind 1, 2, 4, all. What if there was a Zoom app? What if there was an app watching our call right now for me as the host of the call, coaching me saying, hey, Jerry, you might want to try 1, 2, 4, all now. And I'd be like, what's that? And it could explain it to me quickly. And then it could say, and this is the important bit, can I help you run 1, 2, 4, all? And it would set up and name breakout groups, assign people to the breakout groups, put up timers, put up prompts in the chats, record any or all of it that I wanted to, note take as usual, whatever. But imagine that software could instantiate the idea of 1, 2, 4, all and help you run it. And if that software were ubiquitously available, then everybody would get boosted up to better than junior facilitator, you'd get better chops and more vocabulary for what to do. And the AI could be suggesting, oh, at this moment, given this context, whatever, whatever. So that's also part of NeoBooks. We haven't dabbled in that part of it very much, but that's what doing this architecturally facilitates for you. And then finally, and this goes back to the conversation that we started with about @proto, which is
I joined late. Sorry. Yeah.
So we started talking about this geeky thing called the AT protocol or @proto, which is trying to create an ecosystem of distributed apps. And one of the apps that I want for NeoBooks is an app that does what Scrivener does. Scrivener is an app for authors who are writing books. And I tried loving Scrivener until I realized that you cannot copy paste a chapter out of one manuscript in Scrivener into another. It is an impossible feature. And for me, a chapter of a book is just a playlist of nuggets. And I should be able to have 10 books pointing to the same collection of nuggets, and that should work just fine, but it doesn't. And so an app that I want is like a slide sorter view of your book that tells you what progress you've made on what chapters, that has some metadata so that you can then track the completion of your Neo book in the same way that, sorry, the Mac is interpreting all my things as gestures. Here goes confetti. But anyway, that was a piece of it. So and I haven't written all of this down peacefully in one place, but one of my to-do list items is to go describe this thing better online so that people can bump into it.
Yeah, I that's fascinating because it's been, you know, having had this career way of being in education as sort of as a teacher, but now stepping teacher and facilitation now. And I'm noticing the artful difference and the much more, in weird ways, power and responsibility in facilitation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mark, go ahead. And then I'm going to have to bail on the call because I've got to get to a different
Thanks
call.
for your generosity, Jerry. Thank you.
Lisa, can you
Lisa,
stay
thank you for
half
being
a
curious.
second?
Just a half a second, I'm packing, man, and I'm so bad at it.
Oh, go, Mark.
Hacking
Go
is
ahead.
trauma. Now, rushing is trauma. Trauma is rushing.
For
Don't
sure.
rush. Take your time. You have
Mm.
plenty of time. Now, I find that maybe I'm a teacher, but what I do is, as a professional communicator or former,
Listen, former
I translate complex to simple.
Yeah.
I do chunking, which is the neurological studies term for what Jerry called as neo
nuggets.
Thank you. And
Nuggets.
I have so many things to say from notes that I've taken down that a compendium is really an encyclopedia. And a pattern language is exactly a structure for organizing structures with examples. Some of those examples are automated examples called code. Talk to me.
Yeah, I'd like this because both of what you said, both of you, would be a really foundational element to this thing I'm building, but the ground that it needs to be on. So yeah, because I'm looking at a global app.
Software's hard. It's really, really, really difficult. It really
Lisa,
is.
please do reach out and join me in a one-on-one if you would.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear your needs and goals.
Week. Yeah, thank you. And I was meeting with some women this morning that I think would be some good partnerships from that. Thank you, folks.
Hold up half the sky, but they also run half of hell.
We must both, but thank you very much. I'm really glad we had this tail end conversation.
Be well, folks. Thank you.
Take care.
Judy, thanks for coming.
Thanks. Good to see you,
Good
Judith.
to see you. Take care.
Bye, y'all.